Welcome back to The Real Deal. I'm your host, Kim Hollingshead, and on today's program, we're really talking about baby boomer generation and what it was like whenever they were buying their house and all the challenges that they've gone through. And now they kind of seem to be the ones who are in power. They've put us in this conflict in Iran. Really, for the most part, I would say it is the baby boomer generation. I see a lot of, anger and misunderstanding starting to build out there. There seems to be a lot of blame placed on Israel at the moment. So I want to take this moment right now in this segment to really talk about what is going on, where this, why are we even in Iran? So let's start out with the Holocaust. Let's start with the Holocaust itself, okay? Let's start with the Holocaust. We know that around 6 million Jewish men, women, and children were murdered by the Nazi German regime and its collaborators, for sure. This is a figure that's actually calculated from German records. It is from demographic data that was taken before and after the war. About 2.7 million Jews were murdered at 5 dedicated killing centers using poison gas. And roughly 2 million were murdered in mass shootings across all of occupied Eastern Europe. Not just Jews. There were non-Jews who were also murdered just because of their ethnicity, but the Jews in particular. So somewhere between 800,000 and another million more died in ghettos and in labor camps from starvation, disease, and violence. When the American soldiers saw this in person, they were absolutely devastated, okay? In April of 1945, General Dwight D. Eisenhower actually toured a camp near Gotha, Germany, and he was there with Generals Patton and General Bradley. These are the 3 top, right? Days later, he cabled General Marshall in Washington, and his words are on the record for forever. The things he saw were actually things like evidence of starvation, cruelty. It was so overpowering that it actually left General Eisenhower sick. There was an entire room of bodies that General George Patton would not walk into. These are men who are very familiar with war. They've seen a lot of death and destruction in their day. General Patton couldn't even walk in to see this room full of bodies. Dwight D. Eisenhower made the decision at that time that he brought members of Congress and the American press over to Germany because he wanted them to see with their own eyes, and he wanted them to document the atrocities that were going on, because he said that he never wanted anybody in the future to ever call the reports propaganda or to call them lies. So when I hear people online saying those exact things right now, it just makes my blood boil. I mean, I gotta tell you, it makes me so mad, because what happened to the Jews was not propaganda. The Holocaust absolutely occurred. Now, what happened is that after the liberation, more than 250,000 Jewish survivors, after the war was over, all the way until 1952, which is years after this war was over, they were still living in displaced camps, because there was absolutely nowhere on the planet for them to go. You have to remember, the United States had very restrictive immigration laws on the books at that time. Great Britain, they restricted immigration into Palestine because Great Britain actually controlled Palestine. And, they couldn't go back to Poland because there was things like, they were just murdering people. I mean, it's absolutely insane. There would be like dozens and dozens of people just murdered in the streets just because they were Jewish. And these are the things that were happening in many European countries at that time. So you have to think about this, because this is like actually what happened is that after the war, the Jewish people, they needed to have some place to go. And what the British monarchy and parliament decided was that since they controlled Palestine, that they were actually going to take Palestine and split it. They were going to give the Jews a part of Palestine and then allow the Arabs to keep a part of Palestine. This was decided under a League of Nations mandate. There was a United Nations special committee on Palestine that actually recommended, this plan. And they actually decided that what they needed to do was to partition that state. So that's why we have, part of Palestine and then we have Israel, right? Now, under President Truman, the United States actually recognized Israel as a totally separate country. So I'm not going to sit here, you're not going to ever hear me say and make it pretend like there were not already millions of Arabs living in that area. There were. There were Arabs who were living there and have been living there for many, many years, generations of people. Roughly 800,000 Arabs were displaced during that conflict. So even the Palestinians still remember that today. So we're not going to discount what happened, but we need to understand how that came about. Because Great Britain and the League of Nations and the United Nations is really where that came from. This was kind of a global decision. Everyone recognized that the Jewish people needed to have somewhere to go. They needed to have a safe place that was their own country. And, the reason is because 6.5 million of them had died during World War II, and they didn't ever want to see anything like that happen again. So what we see is that the United States has, for the most part, Protestant Christians in this country, been very loyal to Israel. And, of course, because being a Judeo-Christian means that we have respect for the Jewish people. Of course, Jesus was a Jew. And, so there is this very formal aid structure that goes, where we really do provide for security. We provide money to Israel. This country has been very supportive of that. But what we see in Israel as well is that there is this small country is under a threat of a nuclear bomb going off. Now, the way that many people describe Israel, it's a one-bomb country because almost all of the Jewish people, over half of them in Israel, actually just live in the city of Tel Aviv. So, and huge percentage of Jewish people in the world live in Israel, right? So, it would just wipe out, for the most part, the Jewish people as a people. So not Israel as a country, but the Jewish people as an entire nation and ethnicity of people would be wiped out by one nuclear bomb, okay? Let's talk about what a nuclear weapon actually does, because I think that this really matters to this discussion, okay? A nuclear detonation, what it's going to do is it's going to produce a blast wave that is going to level buildings for miles. Then there's going to be a thermal pulse. This is an instant flash of heat and light. It causes severe burns and it starts fires across a wide area. A burst of radiation is, going to be going out at the moment of the detonation. And then furthermore, you have fallout of radioactive particles that drift around and they settle for days. In a dense city, like for instance, Tel Aviv, we would also see something that it would be like hell on earth. It would be a firestorm, which is a self-feeding mass fire. It actually is so large that it generates its own hurricane force winds. And the hurricane force winds created by the fire feeds the fire. I can't even imagine anything like this. Not only that, but there is this electromagnetic pulse that just wipes out electronics for a huge radius around where this bomb is detonated. Okay. I want to put it into scale for you guys. The bomb that was released in Hiroshima was around 15 kilotons. Nagasaki was a larger bomb. It was around 21 kilotons. And those bombs that went off in Japan actually ended up killing about 500,000 people in total. The devastation that would occur when 45% of the entire world's population of Jews lives inside of Israel, it would be much bigger than anything we ever saw in the Holocaust. It would be horrible. what we need to understand is that the option for the Iranians to have a bomb is absolutely impossible. We cannot have that because the Iranians have already said that as soon as they get a bomb, they're going to use it. They're going to use it on Israel. And the United States will not tolerate that. Okay? So we had to go in and we had to stop the program, even though it caused a temporary rise in oil prices. And Americans tend to be very upset about this. And I am starting to hear people blame the Jews, and they're upset that the Jews are in Palestine and they're calling it a genocide. I think it's just outrageous. I mean, I have never seen anything like this. We have Hamas, that is a terrorist organization. Hamas attacked Israel, and Israel counterattacked in order to protect itself. And then on the other side, it's got Iran with this nuclear bomb going off. And we've got Americans here, kind of blaming the victim in the situation. And the reason that they're there in the first place is because they have nowhere else in the world to go. The world came together and decided to give them a home and in this place. And yes, they did displace 1 million Arabs. Absolutely. And that wasn't their fault. The Arabs didn't fight in World War II. They weren't in Germany killing millions of Jews. They didn't have anything to do with it. That is what the world decided. And Palestine was under the control of Great Britain. So it wasn't as if Palestine was just this free country and out of nowhere, the Europeans came in and decided to do this to them. They were under the control of Great Britain, and that was a decision that was made at that time. So I think everyone needs to just calm down. But at the end of the day, we cannot have a nuclear weapon that is going to be used to take out the entire Jewish people, okay? And when we come back from the break, we're going to talk about what happens here. Why did this entire situation in Iran, how is it impacting mortgage rates and what's happening at the closing table here in the United States? If you're thinking about getting a mortgage or you're thinking about buying a home or selling a house, don't hesitate to give me a call. I'm not a realtor, I'm not a loan officer, but I can connect you with the best in the business. Give me a call, connect you in the trusted network. It's 615-257-0565 at therealdealradio.com. Guys, we'll be right back. You're listening to Super Talk 99.7 WTN.